get very worried about, is the values that I just laid out are not values that all countries share. And when you get into some of the more authoritarian countries and their data policies, they're very different from the kind of regulatory frameworks that that across Europe and across a lot of other people are talking about or have put into place. And just to put a finer point on it, and recently I've come out and I've been very vocal that I think that more countries should adopt a privacy framework like GDPR in Europe. And a lot of people, I think, have been confused about this. They're, well, why are you arguing for more privacy regulation? Why now, given that in the past you weren't as positive on it? And I think part of the reason why I am so focused on this now is I think at this point, people around the world recognize that these questions around data and AI and technology are important. So there's going to be a framework in every country. I mean, it's not like there's not going to be regulation or policy. So I actually think the bigger question is, what is it going to be? And the most likely alternative to each country adopting something that encodes the freedoms and rights of something like GDPR, in my mind, the most likely alternative is the authoritarian model, which is currently being spread, which says, as every company needs to store everyone's data locally in data centers, and if I'm a government, I should be able to go send my military there and be able to access whatever data I want, and be able to take that for surveillance or military or helping local military industrial companies. And I mean, I just think that that's a really bad future, right? That's not the direction that I, as someone who's building one of these internet services, or just as a citizen of the world, want to see the world going.
To be the devil's advocate for a moment, I mean, if I look at it from the viewpoint, let's say, of India, so I listened to the American president saying America first, and I'm a nationalist, I'm not a globalist, I care about the interests of America, and I wonder, is it safe to store the data about Indian citizens in the US and not in India, when they're openly saying they care only about themselves? So why should it be in America and not in India?
Well, I think that there's the motives matter, and certainly I don't think that either of us would consider India to be an authoritarian country that has. So I would say that.
It can still say we want data and metadata on Indian users to be stored on Indian soil. We don't want it to be stored on American soil or somewhere else.
Yeah, and I can understand the arguments for that, and I think that the intent matters, right? And I think countries can come at this with open values and still conclude that something like that could be helpful. But I think one of the things that you need to be very careful about is that if you set that precedent, you're making it very easy for other countries that don't have open values and that are much more authoritarian and want the data not to protect their citizens, but to be able to surveil them and find dissidents and lock them up. So I think
I agree. I mean, but I think that it really boils down to the questions that do we trust America? And given the past 2-3 years, people in more and more places around the world. I mean, previously, say if we were sitting here 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 40 years ago, then America declared itself to be the leader of the free world. We can argue a lot whether this was the case or not, or at least on the declaratory level, this was how America presented itself to the world. We are the leaders of the free world, so trust us, we care about freedom. But now we see a different America. America which doesn't want even to be, again, it's not a question of even what they do, but how America presents itself no longer as the leader of the free world, but as a country which is interested above all in itself and in its own interests. And just this morning, for instance, I read that the US is considering having a veto on the UN resolution against using sexual violence as a weapon of war. And the US is the one that thinks of vetoing this. And as somebody who is not a citizen of the US, I ask myself, can I still trust America to be the leader of the free world if America itself says, I don't want this role anymore.
Well, I think that that's a somewhat separate question from the direction that the internet goes in, because I mean GDPR, the framework that I'm advocating, that it would be better if more countries adopted something like this, because I think that that's just significantly better than the alternatives, a lot of which are these more authoritarian models.